Thank you for joining us, gentlemen. We have about an hour for discussion. Let's start off by defining the smart city. How do you approach this concept, and what components would you include in the definition? Let's do this in order. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to this interesting conference. Let me speak from the viewpoint of finance. Again, it's a multi-layered aspect. Let me refer back to the European communication, the triad of transportation, teleinformatics, and communication. Another layer that is closer to IoT is research and development, the creative thread that the previous panel touched on, including the deployment. And number 3, education, including e-competence and raising of awareness. Speaking about European Union funding earmarked for these aspects in the current perspective, I will say as follows. My component list is far from definitive, but what they have in common is that we can expect the funding aspect, the element of transportation or the energy will be part of the environment and infrastructure component. When we talk about the teleinformatics, we see it being part of the second edition of the Digital Poland program. When we talk about deployment in terms of services, we can talk about smart city. And education should come from the European fund. The Digital Poland program now features the first draft of this program. Initially, there was a lot of financing going to the supply side of the telecommunications networks. In the current perspective, we are going to see a bigger ranking given to the services aspect. Nationally, the funding will go to scalable project. The regional operational programs will play a big part in that. It looks very promising. It never occurred to me that you can approach the concept of smart city from the viewpoint of the funding and the opportunities that entail. I agree that it is an important aspect to begin with. The first thought that I had when approaching the participation of the definition of smart city, I wanted to think of smart cities, urban and rural side, because the demarcation lines between cities and the countryside are blurry nowadays. So we maybe shouldn't talk about cities, but people with human inhabitants in them. But to get back to the root of the matter, I would say that the whole aspect has to do with a couple of components. Number 1, financing, which is very important, if not instrumental, for smart cities to actually take place. Number 2, Internet of Things is a vital component as well. We have to think in terms of devices communicating with one another. So we need to factor in artificial intelligence and machine-to-machine coupling, but also machine-to-human being coupling that we should be factoring in. Because automatic machine-to-machine communication would not be enough. We have to put the human being between those machines. We also have to know how to manage the aspects of the communication, and that task falls into the hands of the operators. And we have to be able to manage the entire data sets and to be able to transfer the data and correlate it. New projects and new technologies will probably come to the aid here, and we will most likely see financing of these new technologies as an important component. Another one has to do with the people, or maybe I should say communities, that will be in communication with one another. These communities are changing and have been transforming. What we saw 10 years ago will take a different shape a few years from today. I liked what my colleague said about the polyp farm. I don't know if you took note of that. The Z generation that we see now emerging is oriented at consumption rather than giving something back. So automation and anything that the new technology delivers in the form of smart city or smart countryside will offer solutions that this generation will be very receptive of. In conjunction with the two previous elements, the new generation will be filled with new use cases that we can talk about. The final element here is the city itself, or its administration and local government, that need to learn to reap and manage the benefits that will entail. That again leaves an open field for discussion. Maciej Zaszak, Emitel, good morning. It would be hard to add anything here definition-wise. I never thought about smart cities as being clever. It's an interesting thought that we heard from our speaker. I thought of them as more intelligent than witty or clever, but these are quite synonymous. To speak about the definition, I would say that these cities have to be serving the human needs, and they have to address these needs. Whether we talk about M2M communication or machine-to-human communication, we have to remember that at the end of the day, it is the benefits that come from these communications that we have to be mindful of, and the benefits should be in the form of allowing the inhabitants to move faster, to work more efficiently, and to have a better standard of living. One of the use cases that was brought up before was the application of smart parking areas. Such projects can make it quicker for the inhabitants to travel from point A to point B. We have to think in terms of sectors. Sensors and meters, all of that to have to make this cities more effective and for the inhabitants to live better. So the technology is to serve the local population and local businesses so that we can look at the city as an ecosystem functioning better. We are talking about the definitions, but I think that we can slowly move on to talking about the needs of the inhabitants, because they will be the ones who are going to be using these devices. So maybe we could touch on speaking with the stakeholders a little bit. Good morning, Dariusz Łupkowski, Huawei, Poland. Let me refer to the aspect of the definition again. I was thinking whether there could be one primary definition found, and I tried looking for it on the internet. And As it turns out, we've been talking about smart cities for the past 20 or 30 years. Initially, it all started as a thread that was touched upon by the aficionados that had visions. Then the definitions reached a level of better normalization. But still, it is very hard to define what smart cities are. I don't think I would even be able to repeat the definitions that we have heard in this very panel, because all of the above have made reference to different aspects of human activity. So in my attempt to find the right definition, I came to the following conclusion. In order to have a smart city, we need to be able to manage the city in a safe and efficient way to meet the needs of the local population. That's number one. Number two, we have to be able to deliver safe and efficient solutions to all the people living within a city so that we can live a good life. And number three, we have to also be able to take care of the local business population. As my previous speaker mentioned, when business thrives, we can collect taxes and we can invest money. So management, inhabitants, and local businesses are the three components that I would want to focus on. Please allow me to quote the following definition that I took to Likely. The smart city is happening when the local authorities notice that new technologies can, in an efficient and easy and user-friendly manner, become the initiators for the use of the resources that are already there for the benefit of humanity. We spoke so much about the technological side, but now if we are to move to speaking with the inhabitants, I'd like to tell you that my son has been going to school for a year or so, and when I'm getting the documentation for him ready so that he would be able to use the specialty transportation for children with disabilities, I thought to myself, why do I have to fill all that paperwork out each and every time if it should be made available to everybody? Why do I have to fill all of those forms out so many times? I thought that I would be able to go into the government office in question and show them my ID and the paperwork would be done for me, but that wasn't the case. So that falls into the category of making lives easier for the inhabitants, and I think that's something that lies at the groundwork of what smart cities are. We have to be able to use the big data for the benefit of the inhabitants. I think that the carriers, one of which I represent, will be able to handle that data set and to show that it can be applied to the benefit of the population. Maciej Szafranti, T-Mobile. Whenever we hear debates about smart cities, we notice how they begin. It is usually with the figures quoting how many people already live in cities and how those figures will change in the future. I think we should speak about people. First of all, we have to be able to understand who we are talking to and why. When we are in the debate on smart cities, it is the local decision makers that would be at the top of the list of who we should be talking to, followed by the inhabitants. So number one, the decision makers, number two, the inhabitants, because it is the lives of inhabitants that we want to improve. And if their lives are not improved, are not made easier, then at least they should live cheaper. Because everything boils down to savings. It'll be much easier to deliver the results when we present the bottom line. And now, moving on, since we've understood now that we are talking about the decision makers, the inhabitants, and the solution vendors, we can say and conclude that we've seen various solutions out there for the past 20 or 30 years, but they don't really translate to the improved livelihood of an average citizen. Every city features a road that could use some improvement. There are various amenities, but we have to showcase them. We have to present amenities and improvements to the cities, and we need to do that in pilot projects in order not to overspend and at the same time to show the utility of some solutions that we are planning to implement. But let's not caricaturize these solutions. Let's not put into place solutions that will be useless. What is the point of putting parking sensors on one side of the street if the other side of the street does not have them? So we need to focus on utility. We are running a project at Wrocław where we are putting sensors in the parking lots for buses and at the parking spots for the disabled. As a result of this project, we are going to cover the entirety of the city. The scale is not huge enough to kill the budget. I think that is the right direction to follow. We started off by running a dialogue, pre-pilot, and then post-commercialized commercialization. We also got feedback, all with the aim to show that intelligent solutions, that smart solutions in cities do make sense.
Siemens.
Mariusz Kondraciuk, Siemens. So let me follow the thread that appeared in some of your comments. So smart city is a city that is a good and comfortable place to live. First and foremost, it's not only about data transfer. So what I would like to refer to is that we need to have a goal behind the creation of a city, and this is the comfort of the citizens. And we need technology, we need data transfer to achieve this main goal, which is to make our citizens satisfied. Technologies can be used in many areas. As we are here representing technology companies, we could come up with many ideas, like finding your parking space. But I would like to draw your attention to another aspect of living in a city, of comfortable living. And here I mean clean air. Energy efficiency is a part of the smart city approach. If our buildings are less energy consuming, it will create cleaner environment for us. It will make our life cheaper. We'll spend less money on energy and we'll be able to spend our money on something else. If we put the citizens in the foreground, if we concentrate on them, then both service providers and decision makers will have to do what is expected of them. They will be, in a way, against a brick wall. They will be forced to do what the citizens need. So, first and foremost, the citizens should be our focus and our aim. in building smart cities. Thank you very much. Many of you mentioned the importance of dialogue and cooperation with the local authorities. Unfortunately, due to the coronavirus situation, the representatives of the local administration couldn't come and join us in the panel, and I mean here local administration representatives. So unfortunately, we can't have this conversation with them right here, but the dialogue is going on. You are in contact with local governments in your daily work. During the first discussion round, a very interesting topic appeared. You said that we have to use the language of benefits in our conversations. In the previous panel, decreasing incomes of local authorities were mentioned. Their economic situation is becoming more difficult. This may result in resistance when it comes to new investments. But I know that investments in technology can be very profitable. So in the second round of our discussion, I would like to talk about the dialogue with local authorities, how those authorities understand the benefits from the implementation of your solutions. What are your experiences? Thank you very much. That's actually the most crucial element of this conversation. I remember that we had talks in many cities. We wanted to introduce those sensors of parking spaces. We wanted to show the city authorities that they can increase their income. So we traveled around Poland and we talked about the increase of income. Still, it turned out that in many cities, the benefits were different than we had expected. For example, one of the cities decided to analyze the availability of parking spaces to think about other complementary transportation services that could be placed in the vicinity, like those electric scooters. So we travel around Poland, we show advantages of our solutions, but we listen. We listen to the authorities. We give them space to think about their problems and possible solutions. So on the one hand, we need to think about what's possible, on the other hand, on what's needed. Another example, a technical dialogue that is underway in one of the cities on water meters, real-time measurements. We thought that the benefit would be that the local authorities won't have to employ as many people as before to control those meters. But they told us that this technology that we propose will never be able to replace those people who can make some additional money on those measurements reading. But our meters could help manage the water flow. This could lead to economies when it comes to water distribution. What we do is we travel around Poland, we explain our solutions, and we listen to the needs. And coming back to the parking space issue, in one of the cities we had a conversation during which I heard we don't need that kind of technology because we don't have paid parking spaces. But then we came up with another idea. The technology could be used to inform coach drivers and bus drivers where they could park and for how long. So it's very important to get feedback and to adjust our technological solutions to the needs. If it's about heat islands, if it's about parking spaces, if it's about water metering, we can address problems. But it's not about implementing a solution just for it to be there, but it's all about finding the right solution for the problem that exists. So, talking about our conversations with the local authorities, we need to understand their challenges. There's less financing, and there are more and more problems. If we can deliver financing models with our technological solutions, then we can be effective. For example, if we can finance our solutions over time with smaller payments, or if we can show the economies for a municipality, then we can be successful. But if the local governments do not have funds for investment, then you may have the best solutions possible, and there will be no way of implementing it. So I guess that what we can and what we should do is propose solutions that also have their financial tool. But cities and smart cities are not only about municipalities. You can also cooperate with businesses and housing cooperatives. This is a very interesting topic. When you think about big cooperatives, housing cooperatives that sometimes manage whole blocks of cities, this is a very interesting prospective partner. In my travels around Poland, in my different conversations with local mayors, sometimes I was quite surprised with the wish lists prepared by those mayors. They would ask us whether we had electric buses, for example. Among those innovative mayors, there are people who want to look for financing for interesting ideas, and they have their own ideas. So what we need to show them is that it's not enough to be super optimistic about innovative solutions. We need to make them aware that maintenance is important, that adjusting a solution to the needs of a city is something very important. Local authorities want to have custom-made solutions. There's a lot of requirements from the cities, which makes it difficult to replicate those solutions. Of course, every city is different, is unique. They want to perceive themselves as unique. But from the point of view of developing solutions, then we need to put it quite frankly. If it's about applications like those who detect waste or detect parking spaces, these are not very complex solutions. So I would say that it's not cost effective to build a new solution, a new application for each and every city. But I would say that this is our challenge, to be able to convince the mayors that they don't have to have a custom-made solution for it to be effective. Actually, it might be the other way around. If the same application is used in 10 or 100 different cities, the application can be easier to use for the citizens, and it can be less expensive. Financing. First of all, when it comes to smart city projects, they are cost effective on average. Maybe co-financing is not the best way to finance that kind of investment. But there are other ways. For example, financial engineering, for example, loans. There was a project implemented in Warsaw. The aim was to detect those drivers who do not pay for parking time. The project was quite successful. Another example, energy efficiency. It can be very successful when we cooperate with housing cooperatives. Another thing, we need to communicate our cases and our success stories to the mayors of local cities. A solution for Płońsk might be different from the solution for Warsaw, of course. When defining smart cities, I guess that we think too much in terms of the parking spaces or waste management. Coming back to the topic of mayors, a smart city in Warsaw starts with Łomianki or Janki. So, it starts in, let's say, in the agglomeration. Whereas in Wrocław, there are no close neighboring cities implementing the same kind of technologies. So I would say that communication between different local governments is also important. I started our discussion by calling those cities not smart, but clever, foxy, cunning. By cooperating with businesses, with companies, by cooperating with neighbors, with citizens, we can get benefits. So communicating those benefits is key. I do agree that installing meters or sensors in cities is not enough to make our cities smarter. I guess what we need to do is to process data that we gather so that we can use it in a profitable way. You may consider how you can correlate data on air quality or on water measurement. But I think that smart cities will be smart if we correlate and combine data from different sectors. This is what we have been working on. We try to think beyond simple benefits. Of course, there are simple benefits. They are important. I also agree that finding financing schemes for little local smart cities programs is important. But if we correlate all that amount of data from many cities, from, for example, all over Poland, then we can learn something even more interesting. And another thing is that the same technology can be used for many different applications. I'm just very interested in the outcomes of those projects on parking spaces. I'm wondering what we will learn from the correlation of data on parking spaces, and then will we be able to activate the society of passive consumers? Will we be able to generate a new impulse for our society? On economies, we can see economies in many different contexts. Sometimes showing that traditional things, traditional mechanisms can be used in a new way is a great way of showing new opportunities. For example, smart lighting in cities. Probably what we have around us are traditional street lamps, but we could replace them with smart street lamps. And we could economize up to 80% of funds used for lighting. But we could do much more. We could install light sensors that would switch on and switch off the lights when they are needed. It wouldn't be like today that the street lamps switch on and switch off at the same pre-programmed time. We can think about new functionalities, like interactive panels that could be used to communicate important messages to the local citizens. You could also think about local governments offering a space on those interactive panels as advertising space. Or another idea. There are many possible functions, but you could, for example, charge your electric car from such a street lamp. So I guess that as electric cars will become more popular, there will be companies interested in that kind of services. Yeah. And another Another idea would be that of using those lamps for installing the fiber internet, the broadband internet. I guess that as we sit here, we are conscious that we have to introduce smart cities, that it's clear that smart cities are going to happen. Those solutions are cost effective. So, we are so optimistic. Are we just going to walk out of this room and do it? Implement those solutions? When it comes to cost sharing, I wanted to emphasize that getting financing by local authorities is key. But then we also need technologies for grid sharing. And when we talk about cities, we don't talk only about municipalities, but also about companies providing utilities. And then we need solutions that could function in the whole grid, in the whole network. If you have one solution, then data sharing and data processing is simpler. So our approach is to use one set of sensors for different users, for different entrepreneurs, for different entities. Because if you share the infrastructure cost between many parties, then your return on investment is higher and the costs are more acceptable. You mentioned data sharing. Before, Mr. Kozłowski said that the real added value will be created in those areas where we can correlate data. Open source data, opening access to data, this is something that I would like to concentrate on right now. But in your operations, in your experience, how does it function? Who is the owner of data? Do you have access to data? Is data stored by local municipalities? Is data shared? In our project that we are implementing in 2 cities, data belongs to municipalities, data belongs to businesses. We are just a technological operator of the system. We don't want to have access to data. We don't want to manage and administer it. So, just like I said, data on water, data on air quality belongs to the local authorities, to the local entities. But what we want to do every time we introduce a new solution is get as many entities interested in the project as possible. Our aim is to create one network, one solution that could serve many stakeholders. But our clients, municipalities, are responsible for data. I could quote an example of Wrocław. This is a municipality that knows how to manage data. They built a platform of data that is available in the public domain. So preparing for the public contract, in the technical specification documents, we had requirements for data sharing. The customer wanted us to evaluate the price of data availability. I must say that the IT engineers received our API specification. We had a very constructive debate about it. So when we cooperate with a municipality, we agree that they are the owners of data. In other projects, solutions can be different. It depends on a kind of contract that you sign. For example, in one of the cities, there was a requirement to create a system of monitors that would feed information into a few LED panels all over the city. So every time we have to adopt our technical solution, and if one day a local partner wants to have our own API, we'll do it, and will not charge a lot for it. We want our solutions to be interconnected. Water is a very interesting example. If you want to use water for waste pricing, this can be controversial. There are different ways of calculating the fees for waste management. Often local authorities would get false declarations from citizens on the number of people who lived in a flat. So correlating the price of waste disposal with the amount of water consumed was an idea. And probably we should remember that what we do now is just the beginning, and there will be a need to create broader umbrella platforms to process data from different devices, to bring together data from different meters. This is exactly what I talked about, correlating data from different sources, be it from households, be it from cities. That's the future. Coming back to your question, this was a tricky one. Who is the owner of data? Who manages data? This is a tricky question. I think that everybody who deals with smart cities agrees that data should be open and accessible. But it's a hot potato topic when we talk about data. You must have heard about personal data protection inspectors who have their targets in infringement detection. But if we don't have open data, benefits from smart cities will be limited. So if you want to have synergies, if you want to have clever, cunning cities, we need data sharing. But I would say that your question is difficult, is tricky, because data ownership, data anonymization is definitely a hot potato topic. I guess we need common platforms, we need correlation. On the other hand, we have to prevent all kinds of fraud and personal data protection threats.
I think when it comes to data and access to it, with all rigors of availability in mind, is an issue that makes us think about smart cities. Whenever we have an idea, in order to implement it, think of what we need. If we were to change that paradigm and think in terms of cities just posting data without any goal in mind, we could imagine an army of people filled with passion who could build off of that platform different solutions that would meet the needs of particular groups of people. We don't know what kind of needs we might be thinking about, but maybe this could serve as a trigger that could speed up the development of smart cities and decrease their costs. I think it has already begun slowly. I talked with the deciders at Rzeszów, and that's a location where a hackathon was organized based on data made public for the participants to be able to find something out of that data. It would be an interesting experiment to see other cities follow suit to try to put that data to interesting use. To me, data has as much value as tickets issued for bad parking. The usability is the primary key here. If cities use that data further to analyze the flow of traffic, for example, into certain districts, we could say that the data is reused and can be turned into interesting conclusions and useful conclusions, and that's a good thing. When it comes to data in the perspective that is now ending, a lot of pressure and focus was put on digitization of the data and collecting it. In the future, we should be thinking about more ambitious projects where the quality of the data could also serve a purpose. When it comes to Poland, the public sector has better ratings when it comes to data usage than the private one, paradoxically. The data use is about 8%, where the European average is 13% when it comes to SMEs. I heard this panelists talk some about stuff that is close to my heart, about legalities, regulations pertaining to data collecting. We are now witnessing the work done on e-privacy acts, on how to work with data that is not private. There are discussions taking place on how this legal act should be formed without limiting the development of the current economy. This begs another question. The Public Procurement System Act poses a barrier or not? I'm talking about running projects in agile methodology. I tried implementing IT systems in state treasury companies where using the agile methodology based on the public procurement law was next to impossible. It required a lot of thinking, considerations, and being smart in order to implement these projects in line with the public procurement law. And so I'd like to use that to pose the question of there being any other barriers of this sort. I know that you like such topics, Wojtek, but I believe this question to be along the lines of do hurdles pose hurdles when you're actually running hurdles? But I think that is part of the territory. Of course, things could be improved, but it comes with the territory. I don't mean to sound ironic, but I believe that introducing the agile methodology in the future is something that we cannot avoid. We have to conduct dialogues with the parties that are going to be using our solutions. We can't predict the full utility of in building clever or smart cities. The benefits are unlimited, I believe, but we will be able to reveal them and unveil them through interaction as time goes by. We're going to have to interact with the citizens. We're going to have to look at how they use the new solutions. So I don't think it is possible to characterize the necessities of the public procurement procedure before it actually happens without limiting its scope. If we expect from the government official to write out the entire scope of public procurement before it is carried out, I don't think it's possible. But if we include the learnings of working with public-private partnerships, we might be more wise. The commissioning side knows what it really wants to commission as time goes by, as the process develops. So we have to take courage and try to unveil some of the processes. Yes, and I think that we need to continue the process in its iterations. The methodology that we've been using so far is insufficient. It's not based on iteration. It's kind of outdated. What we're talking about should be rolled out continuously. Speaking about the hurdles, I would say that if there were no hurdles in the dash, it would be much easier. If there were no hurdles, we could implement certain measures much faster. But we have to bear in mind that we have such solutions as the technical dialogue stage that is carried out with the entrepreneurships that aim to help us find the final solution so that they can be, and the conclusions of which can be put into the specifications. We can't predict everything that will be required, but we have to be able to find a formula that will deliver enough parameters for the tendering to take place and for the solutions to be awarded. It has to lead to a situation in which we have entities responding to the government bidding opportunities and producing their results. The roadblocks that we see have to be overcome. We have to come to terms with them because they exist in the real world. The public-private partnerships are an easier scope, and they allow the hurdles to be lowered by 50%, but they still exist. The technical dialogue is an important stage, but we are producing or presenting a solution that is tried and true. And this is in opposition to design thinking, where the process is key. And I think that is the direction that we should take. I think that maybe lawyers should come to our aid. we have to have some form of regulation in the form of the public procurement law, but maybe it needs to be improved by lawyers. The tendering procedure has to be taken across various stages, including the specifications at the beginning and then further steps. But some of them are twisted out of proportion and become a caricature of the actual intended process. Sometimes entities that want to carry out the commission task realize that the hurdles are hard to overcome. And then all parties realize that certain requirements are completely devoid of meaning. And then we go to the lawyers, and the lawyers can reply in various ways. Sometimes they say that the entity that is to perform its work is not allowed to overstep the hurdles. They have to somehow overcome them. Let's just hope that such obstructions are not as numerous as you're saying. We want to engender the level playing field, of course. The tendering parameters need to be well written and not drafted rashly. I remember this case for the commissioning of a solution for the local authorities where no consultations were carried out, and the parties that wanted to perform the work were unaware of the parameters that were drafted. And I think that such cases should be eliminated, and it will require a lot of dialogue. We have to talk to one another to try to mitigate the issue and maybe try to have as few hurdles as possible, and maybe put them along the lines of the dash instead of perpendicular to our route. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We have talked a lot about smart cities. We touched on what the definition of the smart city could be, how we understand it, what dialogues with the main stakeholders look like. I love to talk about the city decision makers. Decision makers sounds good for cities. These are the deciders. We settled a little bit about talking to the inhabitants. We talked about open data. We moved on to discussing various hurdles. We also examined the legal situation. It was very fitting for a technology-oriented conference not to talk about technology, ironically speaking. But that's a good thing, because cities are all for the benefit of the people, and technologies only to serve the purpose and not to be the main subject of discussion, as you mentioned in the panel. Thank you very much. I want to thank the panel. I want to thank our audience for your kind attention, and I hope to see you in the future.